Welcome to the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. We're taking a look at the Week 10 waiver wire targets. I'm Alfredo Brown, joined as always by Dave Kluge. And Dave, oh boy, it's a broken record every single week until we just have the one prize player on the waiver wire. But we got another slow one. But I think you and I might have scooped out a few gems on this one.
Yeah, and like even a couple of weeks ago when we were saying like there's nobody really available, like we talked about Cedric Tillman and
yeah,
my goodness, 4 touchdowns in the last 3 games, looking pretty darn good, looking like we stumbled across some gold there. So even when things don't seem great, there could be some hitting gold there. And right now some of the guys that we're talking about might not have projectable volume in week 10, but I think the old adage that you just bet on talented players and wait for the situations to improve rings true, and there are some talented players who have been showing that talent over the last few weeks, still available on waivers.
It's the movie She's All That. Have you ever seen that one? Just take the glasses off, get rid of the paint covered overalls, and all of a sudden, she's beautiful.
Yeah. Yes, I know which one you're talking about. I get like that and Clueless, like all of those 90s movies just kind of blend together, but yeah, the one with Freddie Prinze Jr. and that one.
Yeah,
yes.
See, that's what this week is. That's all it is. All right, so we're going to go over our Week 10 waiver wire targets. But before we do that, I just want to remind everybody, you got a bunch of ways you can enjoy this show. First is on YouTube. So if you're watching this right now, please take a second to like this video, comment down below with your waiver wire questions, and obviously make sure you are subscribed to the channel. And also make sure you're subscribed to the audio version of this show on Apple and Spotify. And while you're there, please take a second to leave us a 5-star review. It means the world to us. As always, Dave, we are going to run this waiver wire targets edition show like a draft. You are going to get first pick. We're going to go through and do our 4 picks through this waiver wire week. And we're going to set ourselves with like some kind of very loose parameters, but we want to always start off with players that are at least 60% available in fantasy leagues, and we'll work our way down by 10% each round. So why don't you kick us off here with pick number 1?
Pick number 1, Taysom Hill, a guy that we have talked about so much this offseason and is performing, believe it or not. Still available in 69% of leagues. Nice. He is probably available in your league out there. And I don't know why he wasn't picked up. I mean, we got word that Kendry Miller was placed on IR. Jamal Williams wasn't going to be active. And Taysom Hill was still floating out there in so many leagues. I had him ranked as my tight end 5 this week. And as of right now, he's the tight end 3 in PPR. This is a guy who normally gets his through the rushing game, but he caught some passes yesterday. He had 5 rushing attempts, 5 targets. He had a pass attempt. Like, where else do you see any player in the NFL getting this sort of usage where he is a rusher, he's a pass catcher, he's a thrower, gets most of his touches near the goal line? He got a rushing touchdown yesterday. Like I said, he's currently the tight end 3 on the week in PPR scoring. He's only played in 4 full games this year. In 2 of those 4 games, he has been a top 5 tight end in PPR scoring. Still available in a ton of leagues. We know that it has been rough for tight ends so far this year. A lot of the guys that we had hoped would break out haven't done so. The touchdowns haven't been there. Some of our elite guys are starting to kind of fall into place a little bit, but Taysom Hill, a guy who's still available in a ton of leagues. For whatever reason, people don't want to rely on him on a week in and week out basis. Has been a top 10 tight end for 5 straight years, and it looks like he's trending towards doing that again. Still available in 69% of leagues. I am going to be ranking him as a top 5 tight end again next week.
Wow. Okay. And you know what? I dropped him in our listener league last week.
Isn't your team titled the Taysom Hill Experiment?
Yeah, the experiment's over. I had David Njoku, and then TJ Hawkinson came off IR. So I was just sitting there like, well, it's time to let it go, fly the nest, leave.
And I'll say we talked about that a lot this offseason, that like that was the strategy, right? Like draft TJ Hawkinson and use Taysom Hill to get through the early part of the season.
Yeah.
I might be okay just continuing to ride Taysom Hill. Maybe trade TJ Hawkinson, see if he can get a bite out there in the trade market. But Taysom Hill, man, like I think he's just going to continue giving us double-digit outings like this.
I mean, we hope. It's been really up and down with the Saints, and now they lose their head coach. They fired Dennis Allen recently. They've got Darren Rizzi as the interim head coach. And Dave, I know him pretty well because he was the Miami Dolphins special teams coordinator for so long. And he is definitely one of those Dan Campbell style players coaches where he's going to give a smash mouth, old school run through the wall type of speech to every single player. And so he might be really well liked by the team. He might start to do some really crazy, creative, different things.
Is there anybody that like encompasses like old school smash mouth football more than Taysom Hill. Like you just expect it. Can we start calling, what did you say the new head coach's name is?
Darren Rizzi.
The Rizzler. That's the only
Nope.
way I'm referring to him going forward.
Nope.
Let's hope the Rizzler likes him some Taysom Hill.
Nope, man. We stay pretty cool. We're very pop culture relevant. We got Rizzler. We had a pause reference. Then we got a nice reference. All in the first pick here. All right.
Yeah, you say we're pretty relevant. I say we are 8 years old.
That too. It could be that, one or the other. All right, I'm going to give my first pick here. I'm going with none other than Ray Davis, running back for the Buffalo Bills. He's available in 75% of leagues. And we saw that big week 6 outing for him when I don't know that I can't say he got the start, but he got the play and he had himself a big game. Since then, it hasn't been a lot of great usage, but every time he is getting touches, it looks good. And he's still averaging over 5 yards per carry for the Buffalo Bills. And this past game took a 63-yard reception for a touchdown. The snaps aren't quite there yet right now. He's just at a 14% snap rate in week 9, but he's efficient. On those 9 snaps he had, 6 touches. So when he's out on the field, he's getting used. And I can't help but think, Dave, that at some point, you can only see this so many times where guys are making plays. They're able to pass block. They're able to catch well. They're able to break tackles. They're able to continue to run for positive yardage every time before you say, man, we're a contending team. We need to just keep using more of our top players. Like I can't see how the Bills continue to keep him off the field in favor of a guy like Ty Johnson. It's not like we have a major weakness here with Ray Davis. So I'm not going to say that he's one of these guys that is a priority pickup, but he kind of is. We're getting to that point in the season where all of the handcuff running backs become priority pickups, especially as we get down the stretch here. Once we're in double-digit weeks, it is just like handcuff season over and over and over every single waiver wire week. So for me, he remains top tier handcuff. And that's where I'm at with him, man. We've seen this over and over. At some point, I really do think the role is going to expand for Ray Davis.
Yeah, and this is one of those situations where Ty Johnson is still getting work. And I think if something were to happen to James Cook, Ray Davis would be, take over essentially the James Cook role, and Ty Johnson would maintain his small role where he gets 20, 30% of the touches. And we've seen that over the years. Ty Johnson is good at what he does, but he's not somebody who's going to be elevated into a larger role. And in the game where James Cook did have to miss a few weeks ago, Ray Davis took over and Ty Johnson still kept his small sliver of the pie. I don't think that's going to change. This is very similar to, what was the team we were talking about early? Oh, remember early in the season, the Rams? Like Ronnie Rivers came in and got some touches, and everyone said, oh my goodness, Ronnie Rivers is the RB2. And no, Ronnie Rivers is good at what he does in a third down package, but if something happens to Kyren Williams, Blake Corum is going to be the guy, and if something happens to James Cook, then Ray Davis is going to be the guy. So easy pickup here. I'm shocked that Ray Davis is still available in all these leagues. As you said, it is cuffing season. I'm going to talk about a lot of running backs today. You're going to talk about some running backs as well. I'll say the same thing that I say all the time on this show. Do not stash QB2s and tight end 2s and wide receiver 6s and wide receiver 7s. This is the time of year, if you're above 500, that you start looking ahead at the playoffs, and the way to maximize your bench space is to just load them up with these lottery ticket running backs that are an injury away from really good production. He's one of those guys. Ray Davis is an injury away from being a potential top 10 running back.
Well said. Well, so you should start writing the scripts for all these political texts I'm getting. I think I'd actually read them. God, what a terrible time of year it is. All right, take us to our yeah, sure. And depending on whatever side you're on, could just last longer. Who knows? We're not doing that. Let's go to our next pick here, Dave. Who are you taking for pick number 2?
Quentin Johnston. And Alfredo, do you remember in the preseason we talked about Quentin Johnston, and I said, you know what, pick this guy up, stash him on your bench. Who knows what'll happen? And I remember almost every single comment we got on YouTube prior to the season was just ripping on me for saying to pick up Quentin Johnston. And
the comment right here in the show as well. Yeah.
I'm sure you're going to push back a little bit. And I'm sure people today will push back as well. Yep. I mean, he's only played in 5 full games this year, and he has 4 touchdowns. And that's what we were kind of hoping from Quentin Johnston when he was drafted, that he would turn into this kind of big play receiver. And we saw it yesterday, career high 118 yards. And people are going to keep knocking him for the busted coverage touchdowns. But it's kind of notable that he keeps busting coverages and that he keeps, finding ways to score big touchdowns. At a certain point, we've got to say, maybe this isn't a fluke. Maybe they are just scheming up ways to get him the ball out in space, and he's doing what he does. On top of the busted coverage touchdown that he had yesterday, he had a really nice play that excited me where they threw him a little slant and let him make plays after the catch, which is what we saw him do very well at TCU. So I'm not ready to say that he's a guy that you need to pick up and just, find a way to get into your lineup, but he'll probably be inside my top 40 going into Week 10 rankings. He is a former first-round pick with elite size, elite speed, elite tackle-breaking abilities. We haven't really seen it pan out so far, but the production has been there, even if the usage hasn't. He's not the worst start throw as the Chargers continue to up their pass rate, which we've seen over the last few weeks. Took a little bit of a dip yesterday, but we are seeing them let Justin Herbert throw the ball a little bit more. Ladd McConkey is clearly the guy who's going to get the most targets here, but I think there is some value to be had in Quentin Johnston. Just pick him up, and if he keeps scoring touchdowns, he's somebody that maybe we will be talking about towards the end of the season as a must-start wide receiver.
The boom-bust nature of Quentin Johnston makes me want to not even roster him, but I think that's just what you're going to run into with this Chargers offense and their receiving core. Even a guy like Josh Palmer, who I was considering for this show, spoiler alert, I didn't pick him, but he's another guy you could potentially be looking at. Justin Herbert's looked good these past couple games. The Chargers offense is looking better. They might hit their stride. They might hit their stride here, and there's going to be some games looking ahead. Cincinnati, Baltimore, Atlanta. Those are likely going to end up being some shootouts where the Chargers are going to be forced to pass a little bit more than they'd normally like to. So, yeah, listen, I'm still not in the Quentin Johnston camp where I think he is
neither am I, if I'm
NFL
being
player.
Honest.
Yeah, it's fair, but that's kind of what we have to do with fantasy football, right? Like sometimes you just have to put whatever the thought process or the emotions are aside and just say objectively, this player is going out here and scoring points. He's running routes, getting targets. He's playing on X amount of snaps. And so we have to be able to look at these guys. We have to be willing to be wrong. I don't hate it, but I don't love it.
Yeah, I think that sums up my thoughts exactly.
Let's go to the next one here, which is another guy that I kind of look at. He's very similar to Quentin Johnston in that I don't even know if he's really quite all that good. And I've seen him for a long time down here in Miami, but Mike Gesicki, tight end for the Cincinnati Bengals. He had a I call it the, it rhymes with gritty and it starts with an SH. And I call it the itty gritty.
It's
and
bad.
He does it. He did it twice, and he brought Jamar Chase in.
Did you see Jamar Chase was so reluctant? He was like, "Come on!" Like they said something like, "If I scored 2 touchdowns today, you got to do it with me." And he was like, "Oh, right. I didn't think he'd actually do it." Like, yeah, you could tell he was uncomfortable.
Dude, and Gesicki actually, he had probably I think one of the best catches of his career that ended up not being a catch because of where his feet landed. But Mike Gesicki is kind of like Bambi with his body. Like he's actually just so tall, so long, and he's really fast, but he doesn't quite control his body well. So when I saw him make that catch, I was incredibly impressed with him. That was one of the best catches I've seen in his career. And recently the production for Mike Gesicki has been a lot better. Right now he's tight end 11 on the season overall. And the other tight end for the Cincinnati Bengals, rookie Eric All, looks like he might have suffered a torn ACL. So any times that we might have been seeing Mike Gesicki come off the field for another tight end, that's probably gone. And I think the biggest thing to take away here from this performance with Gesicki is that he's really the T. Higgins handcuff. As much as we wanted it to be Andre Yosevach earlier in the season, it's really become Mike Gesicki who's become that handcuff. 15 fantasy points per game, a 20% target share whenever T. Higgins is not in the game. This is a guy who's getting the opportunity to just he takes the opportunity when it's given to him. And I don't think that's really something we had seen throughout his career, whether it was in Miami or New England, but we're seeing that now in Cincy. So there's something that just fits for him there with the Bengals. Since he's going up against Baltimore next week, so he remains a pretty good streamer at tight end, especially with the bye weeks that are coming up here on week 10. Brock Bowers, David Njoku, Tucker Kraft, all are going to be on bye this upcoming week. So if Mike Gesicki is out on your waiver wire and you desperately need tight end, I'm willing to actually put a decent amount on him to make sure I have a streamer for this week. Get a really important win in week 10.
Yeah, and Gesicki's a guy that I just fell in love with when we drafted him back in 2018. Well, I say we, like the NFL drafted him. Like just he had every single
the royal we.
The royal we.
We as a nation drafted Mike Gesicki to the National Football League.
This guy just had he checked every single box you wanted to see, and the usage was there and everything early in his career, and it just never really panned out. I will say, though, it's not all that crazy to think that a tight end at age 28 or 29 can go to a new team and suddenly reinvent themselves and break out. I mean, we just saw it 2 years ago with Evan Ingram. It's not all that crazy to think Mike Gesicki could follow a very similar career trajectory. This was an early second-round pick. You look at his measurables, and that's what gets people excited. 6'6", size-adjusted speed score in the 97th percentile, burst score in the 99th percentile, agility score in the 98th percentile, catch radius in the 100th percentile. I mean, this guy, like when you look at his measurables, he's up there with like Vernon Davis and George Kittle and Kyle Pitts, just elite across the board. And then you look at how he's played historically through the NFL. He's one of those guys that's not really a tight end. He's got a TE next to his name, but he almost plays exclusively out of the slot. And now with Eric all out of the picture, T. Higgins injured as well, on an offense that's throwing the ball a lot, the stars are kind of aligning for this late career breakout for Mike Gesicki. So I'm completely with it, especially with all out. He's probably going to be inside my top 12 this week.
And you know what's interesting is he's had these little nicks and dings here and there where he's like questionable, but Gesicki really hasn't missed games looking throughout his career. He's maybe missed like 1 or 2 throughout the career. And he's a guy that he did have a very successful stretch in Miami for 3 seasons where he was a tight end 11, tight end 8, tight end 11 in back-to-back seasons. So there's been a time where he's been starter worthy. It's that final season in Miami and the one season in New England where we kind of forgot. And like you said, Dave, we typically don't see this out of older tight ends, but I wouldn't say that it's not possible for him to do. Okay, go ahead.
He was startable, but like he's a guy that has like overall tight end 1 ceiling. Like if the stars align, like he has that sort of upside, that sort of athleticism. Those are the things we chase with tight ends, and we've never really seen him hit his ceiling outcome. There's still a lot of season left.
A lot of stars.
Yeah,
it's a lot. It's a planetarium of stars.
Would it surprise you with how some tight ends are falling off the age cliff, other ones are picking up injuries, others just aren't panning out? Would it surprise you if Gesicki heats up and finishes the season as a top 5 tight end? Because it would not surprise me one bit.
No.
I mean, especially if T. Higgins, he's nursing this hamstring injury. I'm throwing air quotes up there.
Quad,
I'm sure that has something
hamstring.
to do. Yeah, quad, hamstring,
leg.
whatever, / contract maybe.
Yep.
I don't know if T. Higgins is in a rush to get back on the field. We might see Gesicki continue to just eat in this offense.
Yeah, it's very reasonable to think that he could end up being a top 5 or 6 tight end throughout the rest of the season.
So especially out there, Taysom Hill or Mike Gesicki. Who do you prefer rest of the season? I know. We've never talked about 2 tight ends on a waiver show, so I feel like we have to, put it out there because people are going to want to bid on both. I think I'd lean towards Taysom Hill slightly, but probably putting like $8 to $10 on Taysom Hill and like $5 to $7 on Mike Gesicki. I think that's kind of how I'd set my waivers up in most leagues.
I think I'm going to agree with you there. I think that even with Eric All being out, the snap percentage just hasn't been great for Gesicki. So you kind of have to rely on now Eric All being out and T. Higgins also remaining out and the Bengals having to be in a pass heavy game script, which won't always happen. Whereas Taysom Hill, granted, you don't know with either of these guys who's going to go off, but Taysom Hill, he's going to be involved, whether it's the running game, passing game, anytime they're near the goal line, Taysom Hill is going to be involved. So I think I would lean Taysom Hill in that case.
Well, just threw the poll out there on Twitter, so let's check at the end of the show, see who the public prefers between Taysom Hill and Mike Gesicki, because I think it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah, careful putting your poll on Twitter. All right, let's go to the next pick here, Dave. Sorry, did I throw you off?
A little bit. Just a little bit.
Go to pick 5.
So this is one where, I could have talked about so many different people here. There's so many handcuffs available, but I'm going to talk about Trey Benson. He's a high-end handcuff right now for James Conner, and James Conner has been playing some of the best football of his career. Like literally on an efficiency basis, James Conner had his best season in 2023, and now he is playing even better in 2024. Stumbling through my words there a little bit, but I'm just blown away that James Conner is somehow like Benjamin Buttoning his way through the NFL right now. He's looked fantastic. But Trey Benson has looked pretty good too. He scored his first touchdown of the season last week, had a career-high 55 scrimmage yards yesterday. He's still pretty limited in the role that we're seeing, but he did see 8 rushing attempts and a target, so they're starting to ramp him up a little bit. Like I said, he's a clear RB2 if James Conner goes down, and this is just a fun prospect. He's 6'2", 215, ran a 4.39. That puts his size-adjusted speed inside the 98th percentile. He is a very fast player on an offense that has a lot of good weapons around it. Probably not a lot of standalone value here, but like we said at the top of the show, this is cuffing season. You want to start picking up and stashing those guys that have the really, really high upside. And like we said about Ray Davis, I'll say the same thing about Trey Benson. If James Conner is to miss any time, we're probably looking at Trey Benson as a top 10, top 15 weekly option.
I will not totally combat you, but I'll just kind of like throw this in there as an aside. I do think that we can also, if we are going to look at Trey Benson, I think we can also look at Amari DiMercato. He's like an annoying gnat at a barbecue. Like he just does not go away. He continues to make a play here and there. His snap count and his touch count is not too far behind Trey Benson. While I do think Trey Benson will get the lion's share of the carries, I think you'll have some of those spells where he'll come off the field for a guy like DiMercato. But yeah, once again, cuffing season. Get these guys on your rosters, especially if you already have James Conner on your roster and these guys are sitting out there. So not much pushback.
Fills the same role that we talked about earlier, where he's kind of their Ty Johnson, their Ronnie Rivers, the guy who does good things in the hurry up offense and in the third down offense. But I think that, if James Conner were to go down, we might see a slight uptick for DiMercato. But I think, and I could be wrong, but I think Trey Benson is a guy that would kind of take over close to, even if it's like 80% of the Conner role.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I do think he would get the lion's share of the carries. I don't think you go and you draft a guy that early just to not use him, unless he's been horrendous, which he hasn't. All right, let's go to the next pick on here. I talked about him, I think, last week. And did I talk about him the week before that as well? Let's just keep going for week 3 in a row. Drake Maye, quarterback for the New England Patriots. He is still available in 78% of leagues. And I don't know what other quarterbacks everyone is rostering where they're just saying, no, I don't really need this guy who's averaging 20 fantasy points across the 3 games that he's finished. By the way, that average would make him quarterback 8 in points per game since week 6. And we got to see a pretty phenomenal rushing floor this past week. The 95 rushing yards in week 9 was insane. I had him, I selected the over on the Drake Maye rushing prop, and he hit that in the first quarter. Felt pretty good about that one. And I think that line
got legs, man. Like he really, really does. And we talked about it a lot this offseason. Like he is Josh Allen light.
Yes, he really, really is. And I think that kind of went underrated in this class. I think it's just because Jaden Daniels was such a good rusher that not a lot of people were really looking at what talented rushers that both Drake Maye and Caleb Williams were in this process as well. And now Bo Nix. I mean, we've got a lot of quarterbacks that they really are showing the future of the quarterback position. Guys that have to be able to run the ball well, create extra time, as much as I love him. And he had a fantastic game, so I don't want to trash talk, but like the guys like Tua and Drew Brees and Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, like we've known that that's probably not going to last much longer in the NFL. And seeing Drake Maye have this rushing floor, but then also knowing New England's going to be trailing a lot of their games. They've been 3rd in passing rate over the last 3 games, and they hit a season high passing rate this previous week, 69%. Nice. The game script's always going to force Drake Maye to have to pass the ball a lot, or at least to have a lot of dropbacks where, once again, that rushing floor comes into play. So I think this is also time we talk about cuffing season, but I think it's also rookie season as well, where you want to go out and get as many of these young guys where they have had the chance now to get up to speed. And Drake Maye is another one of those guys I want on my roster.
Yeah, I'm just going to put a +1 next to everything you said about Drake Maye, but I do want to mention Tua. You talked about his lack of rushing upside. Just 2 weeks ago, first game back, we see the entire city of Miami erupt in applause when he slides, and then you saw the play yesterday where he just dives headfirst for a first down. And at one point, I'm like, it's kind of smart because who's going to be the guy that is going to meet Tua head-to-head in midair? Like, nobody's going to do it. Like, they just let him dive. But at the same time, like, what are you doing, Tua? Like, why are you diving headfirst at a football field?
Let me tell you, man, the group chat was not happy.
I couldn't believe it.
Not happy. The group chat was in shambles, and I actually saw it. I saw that the defender that was running up on Tua really eased up when they saw him going head first, and like to avoid it, because you don't want to be that one.
And that, I think, like any other quarterback, running back, wide receiver, whatever, makes that dive at the first down marker, and they're getting absolutely crushed. But you saw that defender pull up like, I'm not going to be the one. No. And, maybe Tua's onto something. Maybe he can just start recklessly throwing his body around, knowing that people aren't going to want to hit it.
Stop. And this was the same thing. It was the Bills game where Tua got his initial concussion.
I know, diving for a first down. And I mean,
Damar Hamlin being the one to do it as well, man. It's just like,
He's a warrior, man.
Sure. Yeah, no, the script writers are in their bag this year for sure. Oh, good times. All right, let's go to our next player here, Dave.
Next player I want to talk about, and again, I got a lot of players I could talk about, and we'll talk about these guys when we do kind of like our honorable mentions at the end. But Jalen Wright, Kenneth Gainwell, Chris Brooks, Cam Akers, there's a lot of handcuffs available that I really like. But I do want to talk about Jalen Coker, and Jalen Coker is a guy that picked up a lot of buzz last week and the week before, and the production hasn't been there. So I think what's going to happen is a lot of people are going to drop Jalen Coker. So this might not be a guy that's available right now, but he's a guy that I would recommend checking your waivers for again on Wednesday morning because he just had 2 catches for 36 yards, but he looks by far like the best wide receiver in Carolina. And I know that's, not a huge testament. Like, we're really, the best player in Carolina isn't saying much. But Deontay Johnson's out of the picture now, and that has opened up more opportunity for Jalen Coker. There's rumblings that Adam Thielen could potentially be released or traded. Either way, Jalen Coker just looks good. And this is an undrafted guy from a small school, so a lot of people might not know who he is. They might not be familiar with the name, but he's been looking very good over the last few weeks. He is a very fluid runner. He's got a leap burst. He's got good size. He's good at making contested catches. He's got great body control. He really checks a lot of boxes, and I think the only reason he went undrafted is because he came out of such a small school. But right now, he looks like the best wide receiver in Carolina. As long as Bryce Young is starting, I don't know if you can ever really rely on Jalen Coker, but if you're in a deeper league where you've got 8+ bench spots, I think Jalen Coker is worth a pickup because if and when they do go back to Andy Dalton, we're potentially looking at huge upside here with a guy who can run every single route, has game-breaking speed, can make the big plays, can also make the contested catches. I think he's worth a stash in deeper leagues because if Dalton takes over, we're probably going to be talking about this guy based on the talent we've seen over the last couple of weeks as a top 30 wide receiver.
So I was going to ask if you thought that Bryce Young was going to lose the job and that Andy Dalton was going to come back in. I am curious. Bryce Young gets the win.
Didn't look terrible the last couple of weeks.
Like, he hasn't looked good, don't get me wrong, but he hasn't looked terrible.
Interception was in the basket. Like, he hit Xavier Legette perfectly and goes on the stat sheet as an interception. But, I mean, that was a dot that he threw to Legette and just one of the flukiest interceptions I've ever seen. Like, Bryce Young hasn't looked too bad.
I'll say this. He looks a lot more confident. He's a guy that's like playing with nothing to lose at this point because either it's just not going to work out there in Carolina, which he was already benched anyways, or he gets traded somewhere else and gets another opportunity. Like it honestly can't get much worse. I mean, it can. Like you can end up third string somewhere. But he seems like he's got a little bit more confidence. If Bryce Young is still the starter for the Panthers going forward, they've had some like tough matchups lately, but they've got the New York Giants, then a bye week, Kansas City, Tampa Bay, Philly, Dallas, Arizona. Tampa
Bay is intriguing. I think if Jalen Coker keeps putting some good plays on tape over the next 2 weeks, and then they got their next week, bye week, and then they've got a tough matchup against KC. If Coker looks good in those next 2 games, even if Bryce Young is starting, I might be interested in playing Coker as a flex play against Tampa Bay with how bad their secondary has been.
And let me tell you, this might actually be the team to start looking at some of these guys, whether it's Jalen Coker, Xavier Legette, any of these players, because down the stretch, it's Tampa Bay twice. They have them in week 13 and week 17, championship week for fantasy. They've got Philly, Dallas, Arizona, all secondaries that are very beatable in games where the Panthers are going to have to pass a ton. Don't look down. We might actually have to rely on Panthers in the fantasy playoffs as waiver wire pickups. So I like this one, Dave. I like this one. Jalen Coker. I'll also just throw in Xavier Legette, any Panthers wide receiver at this point.
Yeah, I think Xavier Legette's the obvious one. I don't think he's available in quite as many leagues.
He's not.
Dude, he's been a touchdown machine. My wife is in 2 fantasy football leagues, and she has Xavier Legette in both. And I just want to say, watching her ride her own imaginary dollar bill around the basement yesterday after that touchdown was fun to watch. She hops up off the couch and she does the celebration with Legette every single time he scores.
Moving on
to the next one. Keep wives out of it.
Yep, that's what we're doing. All right, this is our last pick, right? It's my last pick. Look at that. All right, Isaac Guerendo. He was my last pick last week. He remains my last pick this week. Everyone still remains optimistic that Christian McCaffrey is going to be playing this week, but we have seen so many times that the Niners and the journalists around the Niners and the coaching staff around the Niners have been optimistic for Christian McCaffrey. But us as general public, everything's still very unclear about CMC. And even if he does start and he goes out there, I'm still very uneasy about how much he's going to play Can he make it the rest of the season without getting hurt, without needing to come off the field? And right now, I think Isaac Guerendo surpassed Jordan Mason as the true backup for this team. Whenever Guerendo's had double-digit touches, I literally mean just double-digit, 10 or 11 touches, he's been a top 24 fantasy running back. He's been breaking long runs. He's been catching passes out of the backfield, scoring touchdowns. And the Niners,
he slid down for 2 touchdowns too.
Yeah.
Like he has 2 walk-in touchdowns that he did not take.
Yeah, he's another one of these guys. We talk about Jalen Coker or any of these other players potentially being fantasy gems for the playoffs. Isaac Guerendo becomes that guy, and he's still available in over 80% of leagues, Dave. And that just baffles me. I'm flabbergasted by this. There's a really good remaining schedule. Isaac Guerendo has shown that he probably should be the backup for the Niners, and my confidence level in CMC being healthy, or at least staying healthy, is very, very low at this point.
Now, I've talked about my experiences with tendonitis a few times in the past, and I know, like, I'm not a Christian McCaffrey level athlete. I'm not 28 years old. I'm not, built the way McCaffrey is, but tendonitis, like, it's a weird issue to deal with because you don't get blood flow to those tendons, and it is so easy to aggravate that injury again. And the worst thing about it, and again, I've dealt with tendonitis in my knees, elbows, and shoulders, so it's something I'm very familiar with. And the weird thing is, like, if you're struggling with tendonitis, you can get through a workout and not feel any pain at all. And then you start to feel like 12 or 24 hours later. So this is another one with CMC where he might go out in week 10 and he might feel great and he might look like the CMC of old. And then he might wake up on Monday wondering why his Achilles hurt so bad. So I'm not, we've talked about it a lot. I'm not going to say that, like, well, Christian McCaffrey's active, he's going to be the starting running back for the next 7 weeks. I think that there's a lot of risk of re-injury here. And I'm not a medical expert, I'm not a doctor, but I am somebody who's dealt with tendonitis a lot and know how much it can linger. So yeah, Guerendo, picking him up where I can. I'm in a few leagues where people already dropped Jordan Mason, and I'm like, well, I'll pick up Jordan Mason too. I'm not completely sure who the RB2 is here. I think what we've seen over the last few weeks could have been Mason being banged up with that shoulder injury, Guerendo kind of coming in with fresh legs and looking really good. But whether it's Guerendo or Mason, if either of those guys are available, I think you should pick them up and stash them because there's no guarantee that McCaffrey's healthy for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. All right,
so again, just doing the thing that I do, like the 2 players. Do you have a strong preference? Do you prefer Guerendo ahead of Mason? Because I don't know for sure. I don't have a strong take. I think I still prefer Mason ahead of Guerendo, but I wouldn't push back hard if somebody said they prefer Guerendo ahead of Mason.
I think I do, because I think the Jordan Mason kind of turned into a pumpkin as the season went on, and the struggles around the goal line really started to rear their ugly head with the Niners. And the thing is, like, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Once Guerendo got on the field, he looked good and he was out there making plays, and that was something that the Niners desperately needed with all of their playmakers consistently being hurt. And, I also just think it's just a matter of what kind of transaction can you make. Isaac Guerendo's actually out there in free agency on the waiver wire for your fantasy managers. Jordan Mason probably isn't. Jordan Mason probably requires some sort of trade. There's very few leagues where he's going to be available. So for the sake of waiver wire, yes, it's obviously Isaac Guerendo, but even if both of them are available, I mean, you try to maybe grab both, but I think I'd prefer Isaac Guerendo because it's more of that excitement of the unknown and how high that ceiling could be.
I also am glad that you talked about Jordan Mason's struggles near the goal line, because I've heard so many people, I don't know if it's just like wish casting or hoping or what it is, but I've heard people say, like, well, when McCaffrey comes back, maybe Jordan Mason still retains the goal line work. He's a 225-pound, big-bodied guy.
It was really bad.
No. Yeah, he's big. Christian McCaffrey is one of the most effective rushers at the goal line we have ever seen. Like, there is not a more automatic play inside the 5 than turning around and giving the ball to Christian McCaffrey behind this offensive line. If you think for a second that McCaffrey is losing out on goal line work to Jordan frickin' Mason, I don't know what to tell you. But as long as McCaffrey's out there, he's going to be the Christian McCaffrey of old. There's not going to be a weird split or anything like that. When we want to talk about, how long McCaffrey's going to be able to stay healthy, that's a different question. But when he's healthy, when he's active, he's going to go right back to the player he's been for the last 2 years.
Yeah. I mean, there's something to be said. Even though it's by the goal line, it's a short yardage carry, you still have to have some semblance of good running back vision. You can't, that's why teams don't just go out there and throw offensive linemen and give them handoffs or, hand it off to your fullback every single time. There's something to be said about finding the correct crease to run through, even when you're at the goal line.
Can I say, I did see a play yesterday that I don't understand, doesn't get run more often. There was a team that ran a quarterback sneak with the tight end. I don't know why that isn't the standard. I've been talking about this for years. I know I've mentioned it on the show, Alfredo. I don't know why we're putting, like,
What are the Saints doing then? What are the Saints doing with Taysom Hill then, Dave?
Exactly. Riddle me that. The Saints do it, but there was a play. I'm totally drawing a blank. I got to go back and look it up. Somebody in the YouTube comments, I'm sure will know it. But the quarterback lined up under center and then dropped back into a shotgun. And then the tight end, who looked like he was running across in motion, lined up under center, took the snap, and then got the push from behind. Oh, it was the Packers. They did it. And I think it was because Jordan Love was, coming off the injury. They might not. But, like, Tucker Kraft is going to move a pile much better than Jordan Love would. It was a beautifully drawn up play, and I don't know why more teams don't do it. Once we're done recording, I'm going to go pull up the All 22 and watch that one a few times because it makes me happy.
Dave just watching All 22 all day long. All right, let's go to our other players that we are considering to add on the waiver wire this week. And for whatever reason, they just didn't make our list here. Either we didn't prefer them over the guys we did pick, or we felt like they were probably a little too rostered and we wanted to give you guys some more actionable advice. So Dave, I'm going to do what I always do. I'm going to list out all the players here on the list. If you have any other ones that you want to add, feel free to say those names, but I want you to pick one of these players here. So Jameis Winston, Justin Herbert, Russell Wilson, Tyler Algier, Jalen Wright, Blake Corum, Kamani Vidal, Josh Palmer, Demario Douglas, Xavier Legette, Nick Westbrook-Akine, Van Jefferson, Jonnu Smith. Who stands out to you?
Jonnu is another tight end. We've talked about a few on this show, so I don't want to advocate for picking up a third tight end, but he has been he's seen 6+ targets in 4 straight games. He's averaging 6.5 targets per game over the last 4 weeks. We haven't really seen the usage fall off since Tua came back, so I do like Jonnu Smith in some deep leagues. Xavier Legette is another obvious one that we've talked about a lot this offseason. If he's available, go out and get him. But really, it's all the running backs here. And I know I'm just totally copping out, but Tyler Algier, Jalen Wright, Blake Corum, Kamani Vidal, I think you read them off in the order that I would prefer them. But if any of these guys are available, go ahead and pick them up. I want to get your thoughts on the backfield in Miami because Mostert didn't look great yesterday. We saw that fumble. And after the fumble, we saw Jalen Wright come in and get some more touches over the second half. Do you think there's a world where Jalen Wright could potentially take over the RB2 role from Mostert, or do you think it's just the Devon Achane show, not enough scraps for anybody else, and we need multiple injuries for any sort of Jalen Wright funness?
Yeah, I don't think Jalen Wright takes over for Raheem Mostert, and even though Mostert didn't look great yesterday, neither did Jalen Wright. Like there was just, it wasn't quite there for him, and there is sort of a loyalty that Mike McDaniel has to Raheem Mostert, where he keeps putting him out there to kind of, he's sort of becoming the Udonis Haslem for the Miami Dolphins, where it's just like go out there, you get the fouls for us, get some rebounds, do the dirty work, get the dirty rushes, and that's kind of where we're going to keep you doing that. But yeah, I think that like so much of this is just going to keep going to Devon Achane. However, if there is an injury, and we talk about this with receivers, but also we talked about this for Devon Achane, where he's kind of a double handcuff. Same thing for Jalen Wright. He's a double, maybe triple handcuff. Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill. If any of these guys get hurt, Jalen Wright is going to see his opportunities go up a bit more. And especially if it's one of the running backs, particularly Devon Achane, I think Jalen Wright ends up sliding into a much bigger role and getting used a bit more in the passing game. So that's why I agree with you. Tyler Algier would be the running back I would take ahead of him. But Jalen Wright, there's also something to be said about the Miami Dolphins not having a bye the rest of the season.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's just one extra week that you can get production out of a rookie running back.
And I want to say, we've talked a lot about Jalen Waddle over the last couple of weeks. There was some concern that maybe the injuries could have zapped his explosiveness or anything like that. That last play of the game, he showed the explosiveness that we really like in Jalen Waddle. He was getting chased down by a defender. He kicked into that second gear and was able to get away from him. So really happy to see that Jalen Waddle does have the explosiveness that we were concerned might be gone.
Yeah, to get negative 24 yards.
God, that line, man. 2 receptions for -4 yards and a touchdown. That's a fun one.
Did you see all the people that had
whatever it was? It was bad. Yeah.
There were a bunch of people that had the over on the Tua passing yards, and he was there by like a good 13, 15 yards, whatever it was. He had passed it. Jalen Waddle ruins that on the very last play. There's something where I feel like
fast.
Sure. It looked, what it really looked like? It looked like one of the kids in like a youth sports league that doesn't know which direction the end zone is for them, and they just run the wrong direction. All the parents are screaming. In front of me. He ran so fast and so assuredly in that direction that I was like, oh damn, I don't think he knows which direction the play is actually going.
Yeah, that was.
By the way, that should not count. That should not count as negative yardage against the quarterback. That should be a negative rush, should it not? Once a pitch or a lateral like that, yeah.
It doesn't seem like there's a lot of continuity in how laterals get scored. Sometimes it's negative yards, sometimes it's a handoff. Like with I'm trying to think how they scored the Amon-Ra St. Brown hook and ladder to Jahmyr Gibbs earlier. Jahmyr Gibbs got the touchdown.
It was a rushing touchdown, right?
Yeah, but it was a rushing touchdown, I believe. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown got the reception and the yardage. I don't know how they score that, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of continuity.
No.
But it's fun to watch. I wish more teams start doing stuff like this because it is fun.
But yeah, by the rule of cool, like a lot of those things just need to stand. They need to.
And who was the other team that had a near? They didn't score on the touchdown, but it was one of the coolest last-minute scrambles that I had seen before, where they ran like multiple full field laterals. But it's like they drew it up like that. Like it wasn't just mindlessly throwing the ball around hoping to make something happen. Like they had a cool final play drawn up where it was almost rugby style, where they were doing like full field laterals. I don't know why, man. My brain isn't sharp this morning.
Dude, I don't remember what I had for breakfast.
Yeah, things I should know. Again, somebody in the YouTube comments will be able.
Yep.
I pulled the Tucker Craft QB sneak. I can't pull the last minute lateral one out. Some team did it, and it was fun to watch.
Sorry, pal. All right, well, that's going to do it for us. We went through all the players here for the Week 10 waiver wire. And as always, just want to thank you guys for watching and listening all the way through. If you've got your waiver wire questions, drop them in the YouTube comments down below. As always, if you're listening on the podcast side, take a moment to leave a review for the show. It means a lot to us. And also, if you were in the Halloween costume contest for football guys, your submissions, guess what? The deadline's been extended till 11:59 p.m. tonight. Eastern, and with daylight savings you get a little kind of still an extra hour. I guess that's holding over, kind of, sort of, maybe.
Yeah. Do I qualify for the contest? Can I submit my hot dog?
No, you cannot submit your wiener to the contest. And on that note, we're gonna get out of here.
See you later.
As always, want to thank you guys for watching and listening. For myself, for Dave, we'll see you next time. Adios.